Is that a Fusion World video essay? From Dane Wright? This guy? This one? Masters Lover? Turns out I don't hate Fusion World, I just think it's a little more boring than Masters. But today we got something that's going to bring a lot of life to the game. We got a ban list. Granted, by the time you're seeing this, this is probably going to be the day following, but that's a-okay, right? So we're going to go ahead and look at it. And just see kind of what decks are going to be doing here as we move forward in the meta. So, July 20th. Alright. June. I always said June here. This is the actual ban list. I'm sure you guys have all seen it by now. Kefla limited to 1, Orochi, and Ribrian ban. Before we jump in, I'm just going to give my quick feelings on this. This, like, the Kefla limit really brings Red's power level down significantly. One of the craziest things that I've seen in terms of, like, why is this card hit? Obviously, it's a very powerful card, but for 4, it felt pretty fair. It was still very strong. Definitely one of the best cards in the game, but it wasn't so broken or broke the rules of the game so much. Roshi, I think, is definitely the best possible hit we could have seen, right? Slowing the deck down by making you pay 2 for any given Self-Awakener, especially one that is a turn-over-turn recurable one, and then also gives you game-ending power by making Glimpse into a 1 cost that draws 2, is a really great opportunity to take care of that card. Ribrian, I think this card getting banned shows just how simple Fusion World is. This card sucks. In every card game that has ever existed, this card just reads deal a second damage. That's not good. But for 4, it is so unbelievably powerful in Fusion World. It's a really basic card. I think this card is going to come back easy peasy in like 2 or 3 sets. There's just no way that the game is not power crept by enough that just having Double Strike makes it that much better. Obviously the card is good. Really the reason that it's even on this list is because because Topku could play it for 1. But I still don't think it needed to be hit. Obviously it would have been really strong, but suddenly if they're not on 4 Keflas, well, it's not like setting you to 3 is going to be that easy, and then getting you to 2 is going to be even harder. So, definitely something that I wish Bandai didn't really feel like they had to do. I feel like banning Roshi or errating the leader would have been the best possible opportunity to deal with it. But we're getting 3 total hits, which now... is he really dead? Probably. Right? Like, he's probably gone. Because realistically, at this point now, the best targets to play off of leader skill are going to be our Gohans. Both the one that we're all familiar with off of playing Kefla, but also the 40k, right? Discard 1 to produce another 40k is still pretty good. I think something to consider is the fact that it needs to adopt itself back into being an aggro deck, and so that's why we're going to look at this Frieza today. So this is just a 1 energy 20k attacker, and I think this card is going to be a new staple in Red, because Red now has to be the aggressive color. Before, it could kind of play like a high-value mid-game with Kefla's turn over turn until you kind of get to the end game and hopefully it push a big double strike through. But that just isn't going to happen anymore, so you need to adopt strategies like this Frieza. I think Glimpse is going to be a really imperative card. Obviously, grabbing back a Kefla for a follow-up turn is going to be a really important play if they happen to kill it. But especially, you want to just push damage whenever possible, and so just spending 1 card out of hand to make your, I don't know, like this Frieza here, 3 energy for a 45k piece that replaces itself is pretty good. So I think that's definitely worth it. Clash of the Strongest is also another potential strategy this deck could adopt, right? If you look at like the Murchim or the Frieza, just playing out a bunch of 1-drops and then going Clash of the Strongest, make them all like 25s, 30s. That's one way to play. But then really it's just, I think Red is going to have to, as a whole, adopt this adding power via extra card strategy to its repertoire. We've done it with like 2 ofs a lot of the times in deck lists, but I think now we're really going to have to see it at like 4 or 5 of. It's his turn now. This is probably the best replacement for a Red aggro deck. I mean, it's got a lot of the same set of cards, right? You're still going to play the 1 of Kefla alongside the Gohans, the Friezas. This deck uniquely gets Frieza to be a 1-drop 25k. So if you have access to 4 1-drop 25ks and 4 1-drop 20ks, and then you're still using things like the Glimpse and the Assemble Representative do 7 to push your damage through, I think that gives that a really good opportunity. Not to mention this deck does make your Beerus and your Double Strike Goku, so the crit and Double Strike 5 drops into very valuable 40k attacks, something to consider for sure, right? You can be pretty aggressive, and then suddenly it's like if you can just get your opponent to 1, then you just do like a double glimpse on a leader swing or something. This is the Innocent Bystander. I'm sad about this one because this is my favorite red deck, but it did take a large hit. So as we move forward, these are going to be the adjustments that we're going to take as we presumably enter a green into slightly blue meta. So Beerus took a big hit because a lot of its main value engine was playing Kefla alongside this Gohan, so that was how you could remove cards very easily, but Beerus still has the best removal out of red by a long shot, right? Things like Catella here basically say any 25k on your opponent's board, kill it for 2, produce a body, right? Because Catella is still a 20k, he's still a viable attacker, you get to kill any 25k on your opponent's board, and it's a really great option. Likewise, if you stuck a Gohan and then it happened to either live or you got to get like 5 energy, well now you're killing a 40k with Catella, Gohan, and leader skill. Or if you're playing against green, right, you've tried to push the pressure that you could, but then they start slamming their 45s. Well, great, leader skill plus time skip immediately kills it, and it's just a 3 energy investment, so it's really not super big. Rumshi kills 40k, so it's really good for boss monsters and produces his own body. And then finally, this is the deck that I think best takes advantage of Son Goku Secret Rare. Just the fact that you do have access to burn in a more control-y based deck is something to really take advantage of, especially because you can make any 30k very killable, and so you can get the custom amount of minus that you want, right? Whether that's going to be with like a Whis, Beerus, or the Goku himself, just getting them to as small as possible, so that way Goku can swing over and try to kill for a damage. Wah control. I get it. You guys hate blue. I know. So let's talk about the changes. So, really, friendship ended with Sinister Sickle. Absolute Lightning is my best friend now. Obviously, Sinister Sickle is going to be very strong still, especially if you're looking at like yellow or blue mirrors. But it's not going to be the 4 of it once was. Maybe a 3 of, but probably a 2, right? I expect like a 2-2 split of Absolute Lightning and Sinister Sickle. Being able to immediately answer the green boss monsters as Zamasu is going to be really valuable. Zamasu Fused makes his way back into the meta, right? So Gotenks is not necessarily a better card anymore because Zamasu is going to, or if green is expected to be the best color, now all of a sudden their KO-based removal is going to be a lot harder to deal with. So I think this card can really make a big comeback. Zamasu 2-drop, also going to be a really good piece. The way you'd look at it is that it's a 2-cost 20k, so it is a lethal attack. Cycles a card out of your hand, right? Blue has a couple dead cards, not a ton, but a couple dead cards. And importantly, it basically eats an attack. Because green can't remove it with a skill, they're gonna have to give up an attack, and if you can get, take a 30k attack to the Zamasu rather than having to combo out of it, that's an awesome trade for you. So just something to consider. I don't know if it's going to make the deck list, but certainly it's going to be something to consider. And then Zeno is definitely going to 4. Most lists had him at 3 or 4 just because he's a 0-10 and does his job, but now he's a mandatory 4 of, and we might even be cutting down our deck size a little bit, so that way we can more guaranteed see it the turn that we have to for green. 0 combo, 0 problem. Vegeta, still one of the things, but now Vegeta takes a big change, right? This deck was still playing like the 3 or 4 Sickles and like 2 Zenos, but now I think it's just running basically all Zenos, very few Sickles, and I think it leans harder into its intended engines. So we see the Vegeta and the Goku down there are hugely aggressive cards, but in a Topku meta, you couldn't afford to ever do these cards really, right? Maybe you were playing like a 3 Vegeta, but 0 Gokus. These are cards that are definitely worth experimenting with. Specifically, Goku's really more the experimental one, but now Vegeta can basically come back to 4. And in a meta where you need to be pushing green as quickly as possible, producing this card and just swinging 35 every turn alongside your leader being larger is going to be massive. Then likewise, you can also play Gotenks a little bit more consistently now, right? You have a little bit more deck space because we're getting rid of the Sickles, we're getting rid of some of the Gallic guns, because you don't have to be living those early attacks as much as you needed to before. So now you're able to slow down and play the game in a more value-based system. Oh. I didn't want to see this guy again. But with red gone, this deck, especially specifically Kefla, right? Red might not be gone, but red is still going to be a 20k aggro deck. If you're not playing against like Starter Coup, most red decks are still going to be putting out 20k attacks en masse. This deck is going to have a huge, huge advantage in an upcoming meta here. I think it is one of the best enablers of Broly BR. It is something certainly I'd like to keep track of, the Gohan childhood is obscenely strong, right? So now that red is again lessened in the format, all the blue and green cards that are 3 or less are going to have protection. You can probably cut the twins down and play this Gohan, and suddenly now you have double strikers online, right? Definitely something to take advantage of. This Broly BR is a great piece of removal. I'm really shocked people just aren't thinking about it. Obviously, it comes down a certain turn sooner than the Broly 8-drop, and it's only a single strike. But the fact is, it can remove any card, and it can ramp yourself as well, because you can choose any one of your battle cards. So if you just like have a cantrip that lived, maybe some little 20k, and they have like an Android 17 out, now it doesn't matter. You can ramp this card, and it's a 0-10. Not bad for just like a 2-of copy. It also gives non-KO removals for Zamasu. That's good stuff. Broly is a great deck that takes advantage of really strong ramping tools like Turles and Vegeta, where the other decks were constantly using their own engines. This deck can produce bodies off of its ramp a lot more consistently. And then finally, if decks did start adapting into a 25k offense, once again, this deck is a great opportunity for Bean. Without Kefla, I just don't think they could go fast enough, but if you can make yourself a 30, then you're really setting yourself up to just not take any damage. This is the new green aggro deck. Honestly, it still ramps out really well, but the fact is that this deck just produces 20Ks like no one's business. The fact that they're 4 costs, but really they only cost 1 and then 2 for the twins up there that ramp and the Android 17 that plays another card, really helps this deck stabilize and draw a lot of cards. So I think this is a deck that is going to take advantage of Earth Destroying Blow. When this deck goes first, its turn 4 is unbelievable. It immediately gets itself all the way up to 6 energy, so that way on your turn 5, you can just immediately start slamming 6-drops if you'd like. Or more likely is that you're going, hey, you know what, actually I'm going to Earth Destroying Blow, and then on turn 5 you're playing an 8-cost. Whoa, this deck is crazy. Swinging at 30k as a leader is really powerful, just applying pressure to your opponent's battle cards, being able to cycle out hand very frequently using Bulma in the Android 18, super strong. I don't expect this deck list to change much, other than maybe including more Android 17 that plays the one, and then you can probably get away with cutting some of your 10ks that you were previously playing in order to deal with 25 attacks. This is the boogie bug of the format. Everyone thinks that this is going to be our new best deck in format. I'm not necessarily against thinking that that's possible. I think that the Cell Loop is obviously very strong. Rebuilding energy and making sure that you're able to do 8 every single turn is really powerful. Cell Jr. is something that I'm really scared of. I think being able to get this for free is absurd. Grabbing back the instant Kamehameha gives you a lot of game-ending power, because every Cell Jr. you have is just another 30k attack for free. Likewise, then, of course, if you just wanted to play more defensive, then hey, you know what? Grab back things like Sensu Beans. Grab back things like Gigantic Meteors, like Earth Destroying Blow. And then again, it's going to be a deck that it needed to live early, and now it can dump the droids and just play Gohan. Another 110k. This one is a little less certain, because you do have to have the Goku, and this deck might not play the Goku cantrips the way that the others do, because it needs to play, like, extra card searchers, but we'll see if it ends up coming out that way. I think this deck is still very strong, but I don't think it's as free into blue as people think it is. I think blue's Zeno option is still really strong, setting them back a full 2 turns because they have to reestablish the cell games in order to play an 8-drop again. But that's a-okay. It's still really good. Just make sure that you're staying at high life versus this deck if possible. Ooh, this is the deck that copied Masters, and honestly, I think it's pretty well positioned in this upcoming meta. I think that Blue Power Awakening was only like a 2-of in a red meta, but as we head into a green one, this card becomes much stronger. A 2-cost that removes their card is the most efficient removal for a high energy card that we have. This secret rare is really, really good at dealing with green. If you have a Vegeta in rest mode and you play out a Golden Frieza, their boss monster comes down, it's in rest mode, and it probably still can't kill your Frieza. Definitely something to look forward to. Obviously, this deck has a lot of advantage, but it's really, really weak to red. So I would imagine it's going to remain weak to red, because Bulma, the second she gets removed, is a really tough thing to be in. It's probably not got the best blue matchup still because of Sickle, but now that Sickle is going to get cut from, you know, like 4 to 2 or 3, solid positioning. I think this is one of the most interesting decks in the meta, especially as we look forward into a green one. And honestly, it's probably one of the most interesting decks in the game, just because it's the only one that really has any playing power on your opponent's turn, and interaction is good for card games. I think this deck can come back. I think it's time. Turn card sideways. So we honestly see a whole lot of the same exact cards we saw last format. We see Raccoon, Ginyu, and the 2-cost Frieza. Self-awaken, push face, go, 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 and then restand them all and hope that you just live, right? But I think this deck could also start adopting more into the Mecha Frieza lines. We now have more King Cold options that are available. With red less prevalent in the format, it's going to be a lot more KO-based removal, and so you do get options in terms of playing like the 4-drop King Cold from the starter deck again. And then finally, Bulma. I think we all know this. You restand Bulma, get extra draws. Very powerful for a control deck. At the very least, it pulls attacks away from your bodies and puts them into Bulma. And I think that's a really useful thing. And that's really about it. This ban list really is shaking up how we're going to play Fusion World. Topku is no longer the king. Red is probably out for the count, but don't be scared to give it another shot, right? I think the Universe 7 Goku, the Zoroku if you want to call it that, having 8 different 1-drop attackers is really strong, as well as the fact that there are a lot of still unexplored things, right? So the game may not have a very deep card pool yet, but the way we play it is pretty unexplored. So I'd really like to see people expand on that. Happy building.